Introducing CBAM. As the global community intensifies its fight against climate change, there's a growing wave of carbon regulations aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Countries and regions worldwide are implementing measures like carbon pricing, emissions trading systems, and stricter environmental standards to curb their carbon footprints. These initiatives reflect a collective push towards decarbonization, essential for meeting international climate commitments such as those outlined in the Paris Agreement. On July 14, 2021, the European Commission adopted a series of legislative proposals setting out how it intends to achieve climate neutrality in the EU by 2050, as stated in the European Green Deal. To reach this goal, the European Commission has set an intermediate target of at least a 55% net reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, also known as Fit for 55. In this context, the European Union has introduced the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, CBAM, as a key component of its decarbonization strategy. CBAM is part of the EU Green Deal and aims to strengthen the European Union emissions trading system, EU ETS. What company profiles are concerned by the CBAM regulation? Installation operators export their non-EU products to the EU. They provide importers registered in the EU with the information on embedded emissions for sold goods subject to CBAM. Reporting declarants import non-EU products within the EU. They declare annually the quantity of goods and the direct and indirect embedded emissions in those goods imported into the EU. Definition: Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, CBAM. Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, CBAM, is an environmental policy designed to support the EU climate ambitions. Basically, it's a carbon price that the EU will put on imports of a targeted selection of products so that ambitious climate action in Europe does not lead to companies moving their operations to countries with less stringent carbon pricing mechanisms. The European Union Emissions Trading System, EU ETS. The European Union Emissions Trading System, EU ETS, established in 2005, sets a cap on how much greenhouse gas pollution can be emitted each year within the EU. With the EU ETS, companies are required to report annually their greenhouse gas inventory. With the EU ETS, companies are required to hold European Emission Allowance, EEA, for every ton of CO2 they emit within one calendar year. Companies receive or buy these permits and can trade them. How do the EU ETS and CBAM cohabitate together? Understanding emissions. Definition: Embedded emissions represent the total amount of CO2 equivalent emissions, direct and indirect emissions, associated with a product during its production up to the point it reaches the EU border. Direct emissions are emissions directly related to the production of the imported goods. They include the CO2 emissions from processes such as iron ore reduction, melting, and other chemical reactions and combustion processes that occur within the production facilities. Direct emissions from the precursor. Indirect emissions refer to the emissions from the generation of electricity, heat, or steam that the product's producer purchases and uses in the production process. Indirect emissions of the precursors. Identifying the key stakeholders. Definition: Installation operators. Installation operators outside the EU, also called non-EU good providers, operators in third countries or exporters, are the trading partners or suppliers. They are the operators of an installation producing CBAM goods outside the EU and thus have direct access to information on the emissions of their installations. If their companies produce goods outside of the EU, they are responsible for collecting, tracking, monitoring, and providing the necessary data related to the direct and indirect emissions associated with the goods they have produced and are exporting to the EU. This data includes information on the production processes, specific embedded emissions, and other relevant factors. The reporting declarant. The reporting declarant, also called the authorized CBAM declarant, is the entity which is responsible for the reporting of embedded emissions of imported goods. In other words, the reporting declarant is the company who requests their installation operators to calculate and report on their carbon emissions. The reporting declarant analyzes and processes the data to ensure its accuracy and compliance with CBAM requirements, and then submits the CBAM reports to the European Commission. The reporting declarant can either be the EU importer themselves, the enterprise companies, the buyers, who manage their own imports, a customs declarant for the importer, who sends them the emissions data of their installation operators. The customs declarants could be further distinguished as a direct custom representative is a third party hired by the importer. The representative undertakes the reporting, but the financial obligations and penalties are assumed by the importers. Direct custom representation is only possible for importers located within the EU. An indirect custom representative is a third party hired by the importer. The representative undertakes the reporting and is also responsible for the financial obligations and penalties. If importers are established outside the EU, they need to use this method. Third-party verifiers. Third-party verifiers act as a means to check and improve reporting data quality of companies' reporting. During the transitional period, verification is a fully voluntary measure. Companies wishing to implement this step during the transitional period are getting prepared for the requirements of the definitive period. During the definitive period, declared embedded emissions should be verified by a verifier who will provide a verification report. Verifiers need to be accredited in accordance with specific accreditation rules to be defined by the Commission. The European Commission. The European Commission receives and reviews the CBAM reports submitted by the reporting declarants to verify compliance. Coordinate the competent authorities in the EU member states. Run the CBAM transitional registry, monitoring the overall implementation of the CBAM during the transitional period. Assess the effectiveness of CBAM. Develop the legislation in view of the definitive period. Customs authorities. Custom authorities will automatically provide information to the reporting declarants to ensure that these have a clear understanding of their obligations. Additionally, customs authorities collaborate with the European Commission by sharing accurate and detailed information on imports, including customs declarations and associated CBAM-related data. Competent authorities of the EU member states. During the transitional period, competent authorities of the EU member states ensure that reporting declarants submit complete and correct quarterly CBAM reports and give feedback to the declarants about the CBAM reports. This serves to clarify any issues, address discrepancies, and to impose penalties in line with the implementing regulation, if necessary. Note: within this course, we will refer to trading partners, suppliers, as installation operators and enterprise companies, buyers, as reporting declarants. Let's better understand how all these stakeholders interact with each other. Viewing the CBAM's timeline, scope, and penalties. CBAM will be implemented in 2 phases, starting with the transitional phase from 1st October 2023. The first phase only consists of reporting obligations, whereas the second phase marks the start of companies having to pay taxes. What are these 2 CBAM phases and how does CBAM work? Phase 1, from 1st October 2023 to December 2025. Transitional phase, with a simplified CBAM system with reporting obligations only. CBAM's implementation starts with a transitional phase from October 1st, 2023. During this transitional phase, installation operators are accountable for collecting, tracking, and monitoring production and embedded emissions of goods they have produced outside of the EU and are exporting to the EU and selling to reporting declarants. The first reporting period for installation operators ends January 31st, 2024. Reporting declarants will have to report on their embedded emissions on selected goods they import into the EU. During this transitional phase, a simplified procedure is applied to facilitate the initial stages of CBAM implementation. The reporting declarant doesn't need to pay a financial adjustment yet. Needs to report via the EU Transitional Registry on a quarterly basis. This report shall include the information on the goods imported during the previous quarter. However, penalties may be imposed, for example for failing to submit the required quarterly CBAM reports by the CBAM declarants. Phase 2, from 1st January 2026 onwards. Full regime with the start of taxation. On the January 1st, 2026 CBAM will apply in its definitive regime. CBAM is designed to mirror the emission cost under the EU ETS. From this point, reporting declarants will have to declare annually the quantity of goods and the amount of embedded emissions in the total goods they imported into the EU in the preceding year, and purchase the corresponding amount of CBAM certificates. The information on embedded emissions for goods subject to CBAM should be communicated to reporting declarants registered in the EU by their installation operators. See the European Commission's website, opens in a new tab, for additional information on the CBAM transitional period and updated guidance on reporting obligations. What is the scope of action? For now, CBAM applies to 6 sectors, which are these. Cement is a key building material used in construction. Electricity is vital for various industries and daily life. Fertilizers are essential for agriculture and contribute to increased crop yield. The production of fertilizers involves energy-intensive processes. Hydrogen is used as an energy carrier and fuel source in various industries, including transportation and energy storage. Iron and steel products can be used in construction, manufacturing, and infrastructure projects. Aluminum production includes energy-intensive processes, such as smelting, refining, and shaping, to create aluminum products used in the automotive, aerospace, and construction industries. These sectors are targeted in priority by CBAM first phase for 3 reasons. The significant greenhouse gas emissions associated with their production processes. The trade intensity of these materials. The risks of replacing existing European production with more carbon-intensive imports, called carbon leakage. By including these sectors in the CBAM, the EU aims to encourage cleaner production methods both within and outside the EU, while also maintaining the competitiveness of EU businesses on the global market. After 2026, the sectors in scope will be expanded. What are the penalties? According to Article 26 of the CBAM Directive 2003/87/EC, opens in a new tab. Penalties will be incurred for not surrendering CBAM certificates by May 31st each year for the previous year's imports. Penalty for non-compliance consists of €100 per ton of CO2 equivalent for each unsurrendered certificate. The penalty can be higher if the delay in submitting the report exceeds 6 months. The penalties are applicable only if the reporting obligations are not met. The CBAM report is incorrect or incomplete, and the reporting declarant has not taken the necessary steps to correct the CBAM report after the competent authority initiated the correction procedure. Going further, to help you along your CBAM journey, here is some relevant CBAM documentation. The EU Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, CBAM, explained, regulatory snapshot, opens in a new tab, EcoVadis. The European Commission's CBAM page opens in a new tab, includes a wealth of information such as FAQ, CBAM questions and answers opens in a new tab. Guidance document on CBAM implementation for importers of goods into the EU opens in a new tab. The CBAM page's sectoral information section opens in a new tab for additional e-learning courses and course takeaways on calculating the specific embedded emissions for all 6 CBAM transitional sectors. Fertilizer opens in a new tab. Cement opens in a new tab. Aluminium opens in a new tab. Iron and steel opens in a new tab. Hydrogen opens in a new tab. and electricity opens in a new tab. For more information on greenhouse gas emissions and how to manage them, please view the following EcoVadis Academy courses. Greenhouse gas emissions tracking and reporting. Energy and greenhouse gas actions. Scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions calculation. Carbon reduction target setting. The product carbon footprint data exchange feature. EcoVadis carbon features for trading partners. Carbon Action Manager for enterprise companies. To conclude, did you know? Reporting declarants may face penalties ranging between €10 and €50 per ton of unreported emission. What's next? Great job! Now that you've discovered the CBAM concept, let's look into understanding the benefits of CBAM.